Hello and welcome to SMPD, the podcast where we look back at the shows that shaped our childhood. I am Chris Bolton. With me, as always, my partner in podcasting, Mr. Mark Williams.
Hello.
And if you don't know what we're doing this week by that theme tune, then well, actually, no, I guess that's unfair, because I guess if you're not in Britain, that theme tune probably means nothing to you.
Not only that, there were 3 different versions, so it depends which one you played.
Now, yeah, we're going to talk about this a lot, because I know 2 of the versions. I don't know the third one then.
I only know one. I can only think of one.
Yeah,
I only know it when I hear it, but
I could only remember one. But then the second I heard what would be out, I guess yours would be the same as mine, but would have been our Grange Hill theme from the 90s.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll talk about that when we get into it. First and foremost, this was sent in by a listener. This was sent in by a long-time listener, in fact, by Thomas Meehan at T19M96 on Twitter. Thomas sent us a huge list of shows to look at. We will get around to pretty much all of them, I think, Thomas. Yeah, definitely most of them. But we're looking at maybe getting some guest hosts in for some of them, because to be fair, some of those shows we have no idea on, and we want to do them justice. So we will get around to them. But Grange Hill was one that I think we'd been kicking around anyway. It wasn't on our list for some reason, but should have been. So thanks for sending it in. I did ask Thomas to give us just a few thoughts on Grange Hill, and he said he found the show a while back via Wikipedia while he was searching for some of his old childhood shows. He read what it was about and got interested in the show and also TV production. So then he started to buy the DVD sets, the first 10 series. And he says his favourite character is Tucker Jenkins, who is the only memorable one, in his opinion. And it's interesting he says that, because actually, I can picture a few characters from Grange Hill and from the run that we would have known. Yeah. But actually, if you say Grange Hill to anybody, the first thing people say is, oh, Tucker. You get Tucker, you get Zamo, and you get Roland. That's all you get for people, innit? That's all you get. So yeah, I think he's right. And actually, in watching, I've sort of cherry picked for this, because I mean, we're talking a show that had a 30-year run. Yeah. So there's no way we could even scratch the surface by rewatching it over the course of a couple of weeks. So I've kind of cherry picked episodes, and actually, like those early ones with Tucker, there is definitely a standout. It feels like it's Tucker's show then in those early ones. Yeah. It feels like it's the lead, whereas later on it became much more of an ensemble show, much more of a soap opera. And so I think it's understandable. So yeah, I sort of agree, Thomas. I think you're right. Tucker's definitely the most memorable character there. But yeah, let's dive into it then. Like, you've brought it up already, the theme tune. Like, I don't know what theme I'm going to put at the top of this podcast yet. I suspect I will use the original, because that's what everybody knows. I mean, that's got to be one of the most famous TV themes in history, certainly in Britain, right? Everybody knows that original Grange Hill theme. So I guess I'm going to use that, and maybe I'll use the 90s theme to close, because, again, when I knew we were doing Grange Hill, I didn't think of that 90s theme. I originally thought of the Grange Hill theme, as we know it, that original 1970s, 1980s theme with that slap bass, and bang, wah, wah, just, it sounds like it's about a Cockney school, that theme, doesn't it? It sounds like all it needs is fucking Chaz and Dave over the top, right? So that was the one I thought of. And then when I started rewatching, as I say, I cherry picked, and once I got to the 90s episodes, the second I heard that theme tune, I got hit with a wave of nostalgia like I don't think I've had from anything else on this podcast. It was almost fucking Pavlovian. And look, I was not the biggest, I was not a big Grange Hill fan. I watched it because we all watched it. It was on all the fucking time, right? So we all watched Grange Hill. But that was just straight away take me back to being 13 years old at tea time. Grange Hill's going to finish. Neighbours is going to start. I was just there, just sat at the fucking dining table. I can't remember that. I think maybe Jace I talked about did that with the theme as well. But yeah, it was even more of a hit for me with this one, because I'd fucking completely forgot that theme ever existed. It was and the second I heard it, I knew every fucking bar. So I suspect what I'm going to do is put that at the end of the show, and we'll have the original opening at the start of the show. But what was the third one then? Because I know
I don't know. It changed. So when it came back for its last season in 2007, 2008, there was another version, which I saw earlier on, and I can't remember what it was called.
All right, well, I'll look into that after the show just because I'm curious to hear it. Because I've got to be fair, between the two, I honestly don't know which one is better because they're both
I don't either.
Great, they are really fucking good. Like that '90s one is really fucking catchy. That's a proper earworm. I mean the credits were definitely better back in the '70s and '80s with the kind of comic strip and like again straight away when Thomas mentioned Grange Hill, I could see the fork going into the sausage straight away, like from the opening credits. Like that's just something I knew. Yeah,
like just looking at it now, the title's changed again in 2004, and to the start of a video game, and then they changed the theme for the last season in 2007. So yeah, there's quite a lot of changes out there. So they changed the titles quite often.
I'd long finished watching it by then. I mean, the show was probably, I guess, 92, 93. And I'm taking a stab in the dark based on what my age would have been. Probably up to about 96, 97 would have been my 4 or 5 year span of the show, I guess.
Yeah. No, I thought mine was kind of... I thought mine was sort of 96, 97, maybe 98. But then I'm reading about... There's one storyline in particular I remember. I don't know why the fuck I remember it. But this particular story didn't happen until 99. So I must have been sort of carrying on with it after that point. But yeah, it's bizarre. And I think it's one of those that, I don't know about you, there's certain storylines I remember. There are characters I remember. But there are certain storylines that sort of, even now, if I haven't watched the show in 20 plus years, and I can still remember quite vividly the storyline, but also some particular scenes and some particular shots as well. Just because they're sort of ingrained in there. So it's quite bizarre, and I think it's one of those shows that because it has such a long run, you just know it's like with anything, you'll have your version of something and your particular time period of it. And I think ours sort of slightly overlapped the end of yours and the beginning of mine. But yeah, it's quite bizarre. In this, I didn't have a chance to go back and watch any, so I've done quite a bit of reading today. But yeah, going through some of the stories, thinking, I remember that one. Oh yeah, I do know that one. And just sort of trying to pull things out and trying to once you think of particular characters, then you can start remembering some of the storylines. Yeah,
I don't remember. At least I don't think that I remember any specific storylines other than I remember like there was always obviously everybody knows about fucking Zamo and heroin, like which I could like again bizarrely I remember the first time it started rerunning. And I was watching the reruns as well then, which had
they reran the fuck on UK Gold.
Yeah, but I mean, it reran on CBBC as well. They started showing the old Grange Hill.
They did on the weekends, didn't they?
Yes, and I remember watching the old ones as well, which was a fucking trip because really, like, what did it start? 1979, 1980, I think.
78.
There you go, 78. Okay, so really, by the time. I mean, it's only 10 years into the run, more or less, by the time I'm first able to really start watching Grange Hill. But as a kid, I remember watching those old ones and just thinking, fucking hell, this is old. Like, I guess technology had just come on so much in the intervening kind of 10, 11 years. And of course, I was watching the 90s version with the updated credits and everything was a little bit more fucking street. And they had that weird, like it was all fucking computer graphics and they made everything look like CCTV cameras for some reason, didn't they? You could never work out whether you're watching fucking Grange Hill or Crime Watch. I don't know why they
were kind of interchangeable, weren't they?
Yeah, I don't know what was up with those opening credits. But it had that kind of grainy look to it, whereas the early one was like, I think maybe as well it was that, like, I don't know about your school, but certainly in my school we had an old school and a new school, up school and lower school then.
Yeah.
All right, and I remember them. I say I don't remember storylines, but every now and again, like, things just pop into my head, and I remember that happening in those older episodes of Grange Hill as well. I remember there being a point where all of a sudden they split it and they had an upper school and a lower school because they merged the schools.
Merged,
I remember. Yeah, so I can remember that, right? I didn't watch that first time out, but I can remember from the reruns. And I always thought, like, watching those older sort of 1970s, 1980s ones, like, the older school, or the upper school as we call it in my school, like, didn't change from like 1970 something when my uncle would have gone there to like 1990 odd when I was in there. Like, nothing changed. Same flooring, same desk, same fucking graffiti on the walls, same horrible radiators, same fucking asbestos pipework running all the way through that's probably condemned me to death, right? But that's what that old one looked like.
Yeah.
So I was still able to kind of relate to it, but from the stance of, fuck me, that looks like the old school. It's minging.
Yeah.
It's really, really odd.
Yeah, well, I mean, the secondary school I went to, they had an upper and a lower school, but by the time I got there, it wasn't a case of the younger ones went to the lower school and the older ones went to the upper school. They kind of, I think they sold off half the site to the council for a library space. So then everybody was in the main school, in the upper school, and the lower was just used for they had a lab, workshops, so they did design technology and stuff like that there. But yeah, I'm the same thing. That some of the classrooms in the upper school, like the chemistry lab and the physics lab in particular, they hadn't been done out since the 50s. They had these long fucking wooden benches, fucking gas taps drilled into them and shit like that.
Built-in gas taps.
And I remember my parents went to a parents' evening. It was one of the few my dad actually went to, because normally he was working, so my mum used to go. No, that was her department. And he went into the chemistry lab to see the chemistry. She said, "Fuck, it hasn't changed," and he was the same fucking teacher as well. he was pushing retirement. He and the history teacher, they'd started the same year. They spent their entire careers at school, and they were both retiring at the same time. And I remember my dad went to the parents. He was like, "Fuck me, are they still there?" Because the buildings hadn't changed, and neither did the staff.
No, and that's actually something that runs through this show, isn't it? And I've noticed that, like, watching it in a short space of time and picking episodes from different series to try and sort of get a broad overview of it. That's something I've noticed going through. Like, there are members of staff that have been promoted through the ranks as the show's gone on. Then classes would obviously age out as well, and new classes would come in. That's just such a odd way to do things, but it works, and I think that's a big part of what kept the show running for so long.
Well, I mean, there was always going to be a viewership cohort, wasn't there? So I'm starting in year 7 or year 1 or whatever you want to call it. I'm starting and they're starting at the same time, so I can relate to that, and it's something that I can grasp onto. So you'll have that sort of 5-6 years where you watch it when you're when you have your class, if you will.
Yeah.
And you'll get through. And by the time you get to 15, 16, 17, you go, "Oh, fuck, that's for kids. I'll move on. I'll move on and start drinking behind a spa at 3 o'clock in the afternoon." It's that sort of thing. But you kind of age out with them. But the staff stay the same. And I remember my my secondary school. They merged with 2 others about 4 years ago, and they were doing some introductory welcome videos. And there are 3 members of staff who started when I was there, who were young, who were new young teachers, and are now in their mid-40s, early 50s, and haven't left.
Yeah, that's the thing. People will just stay there. I think that's something that is unique to this, like, because there's obvious comparisons to be made, and I'm sure we'll make them as we go through the episode. And in fact, they need to be made because it's a big factor, especially with the 90s show. When you compare this to the American high school dramas that were on at the same time, when you compare this to your Saved by the Bells, even to elements of things like Power Rangers and Sabrina, where they were set in these high school environments. And none of those really, I think, dealt like this from the same. Like, yes, with Saved by the Bell, you stuck with a class, but they were kind of always in the same year group, weren't they? They just, like, for the run of the show, they would just be, that would be it. You would stick with that class. And then
it's just their senior year all the time, wasn't it? If you ran for 4 years, they have 4 years being seniors, and they fucked off to college.
And then you went on to have, like, Saved by the Bell, the new class, but that was a new show. Yeah. Whereas with Grange Hill, it was always Grange Hill all the way through. So they were characters you could track, like I could speak to a generation before me then who would have watched it, and like you said, there'd be crossover because there's that couple of years between us. There's crossover between me aging out and you coming in. Again, there'd be crossover. So you've got common ground to talk about this show for a generation before and a generation after. And actually with the teachers, some of them stayed around, like Mrs. McCluskey, for instance, was pretty much there the whole fucking time. So it just she stays around forever. So you've got these characters that you can talk about. And then I think you're right. When you do age out, there's probably a certain percentage of the audience then that just graduate on to the other Phil Redmond shows, that graduate on to fucking Hollyoaks, and from there on to Brookside, if you're so inclined. Personally, I wasn't. Fucking can't stand either of those. But certainly Grange Hill, I remember watching. Now, I can't say I was ever a fan of it, and I can't say I or at least I didn't think I had any particularly sort of fond memories or emotional attachments to it. But in watching the episodes from what I would consider my era, like whilst I might not remember the storylines that well or the character names or the themes, or at least I thought I didn't, again, like I happened to randomly watch one of the ones from the early 90s where there's a meteor about to hit Earth and Techno's on the computer like working out what's going on with it.
Right.
I remembered it almost fucking scene for scene. I've probably only seen it once, but for whatever reason, like obviously we'd have watched it in school and then everybody would have been talking about it the next day because everybody was fucking watching Grange Hill. Whether you liked it or not, you just did watch it.
Yeah, it was on, and that was we only had 4 channels at the time, so
well, that's a big thing as well.
Yeah. So I mean that's a big part of it is that there wasn't a great deal of choice. You had, and actually there wasn't any other choice because if you were a kid, children's ITV finished at 5:10. This started at 5:10 before Neighbours. So there was no alternative. There was fuck all else on for kids at this point, unless you had Sky or cable.
Yeah, and if you had Sky or cable,
didn't at the time.
No, if you had Sky or cable, then you were ahead of the curve with things like Saved by the Bell and things like that, which wouldn't come to us until early mornings on Channel 4, like 2 years down the line in the summer holidays. But yeah, you're dead right. It would be your choice is basically like CITV's finished, so you've either got whatever rubbish quiz show is currently running. I say rubbish, a lot of the time it was Wheel of Fortune, which I quite liked, but it would either be that or you flick over for Grange Hill. And as we've discussed before, most of the time later in my childhood I was certainly CBBC rather than CITV anyway. Early doors I was definitely CITV, but later on I was more CBBC anyway, so you just turn it on and you'd leave it there. And that was particularly because like it was on before Neighbours. It was all about how the fuck that isn't on our list. I know it's not technically a kids show, but
I kind of is. When I haven't watched Neighbours for years. I caught maybe 2 or 3 episodes when I was living in Australia.
What's that like? What's it like watching Neighbours in Australia?
Fucking weird.
I bet.
I'd been on nights as well, so I was really not fucking with it. And I'd woken up. I'd been on nights. I hadn't got to bed till about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'd woken up like up as 10. I turned the TV on, and they were showing a rerun of yesterday's before today's came on at lunchtime. And I was sitting there going, "He's still in it. Didn't he die?" And all of a sudden, it just all goes fucking flying back. And for all intents and purposes, it looks like it's turned into fucking Days of Our Lives, where you can't die. Yeah, everybody's anybody's long lost brother, all this sort of shit. And I was like, fucking hell, I hadn't seen the show in years. And then that was 2012, 2013. So I still haven't seen it for years. I can qualify it by saying that again. But every now and again, I'll be watching something on Channel 5. They do occasionally have some interesting stuff on there, very occasionally. And you'll see an advert for it again. How are they still alive? Well, they've got like 150 by now.
Yep.
So every now and again, I do think about chucking it on, but
we should. I think we should. I think we can. Yeah, I think we can actually give it because it is like it was family viewing, I suppose, but it was kids. It was kids that watched it. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it was a kids soap opera, really, wasn't it? I mean,
kids and bored housewives. Those.
You look at what was around comparatively soap wise. You had things like Crossroads and Emmerdale and EastEnders and Corrie, and like my parents, they watched all those. They'd never let us watch them as kids.
No.
Whereas Neighbours was on at lunchtime, so in school holidays we'd see it at lunchtime, or we'd see it after school. So it was one of those. It just wasn't that fucking issue. Interestingly enough, I was just talking to Tori before we started, and she asked what we were doing because she occasionally shows an interest in what we're actually talking about. And she said, I love Grange Hill. I always remember watching it because it was like the adult, the grown-up show on CBBC.
I can see that.
I completely see where she's coming from because you compare with anything else that was on, and even when you got sort of the stuff when this was out of season, so they had the Biker Grove and things like that. Even they, to start with, didn't have the same sort of pull, and it took a long time for them to get going. And it was only when they went down the same route the Grange Hill went down, where they said, right, okay, we need issues, we need stuff that kids can actually relate to. Because, we all had a youth club, but I'm fairly sure no one tried to burn it down or threw acid in my eyes every time I went there.
I was going to say, it was the fucking paintballs that sold Biker Grove. That's all anybody remembers about fucking Biker Grove is whichever one of them it is getting shot with a paintball. I don't know whether it was Ant or Deck. I can't fucking tell the two of them apart. I don't know. I don't know which one's which.
I was going to say Deck's the small one, but they're both fucking midgets, so I don't know.
Oh, one of them's quite tall and bald, isn't he? I don't know.
I'm 6'6". They're all fucking midgets to me.
I guess so. I can't even remember which one was PJ and which one was Duncan, if I'm honest, but I'm pretty sure the shorter one was PJ, I think.
Oh, I was going to say the other way.
Or was it the other way around? I don't know. Anyway, this isn't a Biker Grove podcast. That's to come, so look forward to my hot takes on Biker Grove. I'm clearly an expert.
And my phenomenal Geordie accent, which will come out as well.
Oh dear, I'm not even gonna. I very nearly did then. I very nearly just bust one out, and I thought, no, now's not the time.
Well, I'm assuming you made a Geordie accent.
Yeah, the Geordie accent. Yeah, just like now is not the time to do a Cockney accent for Grange Hill either. That's something I found quite interesting. Is the older episodes, and I didn't realise this at the time, obviously, but having spent a large period of my early career working extensively in the East End of London, and particularly working within the social housing sector on the East End of London, I didn't realise just how much it was focused around kind of East London council estates and the fact that Grange Hill was a school in one of these areas.
Because it's set in the sort of fictional borough of North London, wasn't it?
It feels like East London to me, but London's London.
London's London, isn't it?
It's big,
you got the middle bit where all the money is, and then the rest of it where everybody lives.
Yeah, it's fucking big, grey, and horrible. Don't come at me, Londoners. I can say that as somebody that pretty much lived there for more or less 5 years of my life, whilst I was commuting.
I'll be honest, I do have quite a soft spot for London. I've got to be honest.
I don't, but we'll park that one there. I would normally say lovely place to visit, but it's fucking not. I hate the place. I absolutely hate the fucking place. Anyway, moving on. I didn't realise before I do get fucking bombarded. I didn't realise how much it focused on it. Like it is very Cockney. Those early seasons, very, very fucking Cockney.
Yeah, but by the time I came to it, that had kind of gone away. Though it was a lot more neutral.
Completely neutral from what I remember.
The accents were completely neutral. They all seemed some more sort of Hertfordshire and that sort of area. Yeah,
totally. It was almost as if all of a sudden the area had this massive cash injection. You know, like it was very, very odd to me. Like that was really jarring. I think there was a certain amount of it then, you know, in those early storylines as well, where you get things like Zamo and the heroine and all of those sort of early, sort of really hard hitting storylines for the time. I think that's kind of just tied into that. It's tied into that fucking British kitchen sink soap opera style that would then come to pass in EastEnders and stuff like that as well. Whereas by the time it got to us with the 90s, like the show, it was still trying to tackle things, but I feel like it was actually looking more inward. It got smaller rather than here's there's a big problem with drugs, or there's a big. I remember them doing a rape storyline quite late on, which was
that was very heavily criticised.
Yeah, I can remember that in the media. I don't think I ever saw it, but I remember it.
That was about 2002, 2003. I think I read it earlier, and that caused a big stink. But I remember reading. So I've not seen any, not rewatched any, but I've been reading today. And Phil Redmond was pulled in for a friendly lunch with BBC, and they said, "Look, fucking calm it down. It's getting a bit much." So I mean, he stepped away to do Brookside and then Hollyoaks, and he went back to it, and he sort of tried taking it back in the sort of the early 2000s, trying to take it back to where it sort of came from. So I think that's where the rape story came from. It's getting it back to its more sort of realistic roots. But I mean, they did some of the stories they did really focus on. So they obviously had the heavy drugs run, but it wasn't a case of there's a problem with drugs at the school. It was an individual.
Yes,
because it's easier to deal with it, especially if you're trying to teach kids that no, drugs are bad. Okay, it's easier to show that actually it's a problem and you descend into it, not it's a societal problem where actually they're fucking everywhere. And it's easier to get hold of drugs and smarties, and they will fucking kill you. And there are other problems associated like crime and sort of theft and gang problems and all this sort of stuff, which you could see the attraction of trying to portray that and trying to show that side of it, but at the same time you don't want to petrify the parents and the BBC, because they'll take you off the air. And so I think that was probably why they went for those sort of safer options. And as I said earlier, I remember there's a particular story I remember really well. I don't fucking know why, but it was about a girl who started going out with a boy. He was in a gang, and there was some altercation with a rival gang, and he ended up hurting somebody. So then they went after her and they ended up slashing her face. So I remember that storyline really, really vividly. I couldn't tell you why. But again, rather than it being this massive gang problem in school, which, I mean, this would have been about 1998,